I gripped the edge of the vanity, my knuckles white as I stared at my reflection. The soft glow of the morning light filtered through my bedroom window, casting a warm golden hue across the bridal gown hanging beside me. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. Delicate lace sleeves, a fitted bodice, a flowing train. Today was supposed to be my day, but I could feel it. The storm brewing just beneath the surface. A soft knock at the door. "Linda?" I turned to see my fiancé, Daniel, peeking in, his expression unreadable. That wasn't good. Daniel always wore his emotions like a billboard. Joy, excitement, frustration. But right now, his face was carefully neutral. I set my brush down. "What happened?" He stepped in and closed the door behind him. "Your sister called me last night." My stomach twisted. "She's coming to the wedding, isn't she?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Daniel let out a slow breath. "Not just coming. She wants to walk down the aisle, before you, in a wedding dress." Silence. Deafening. A slow, creeping horror seeped into my veins, and for a moment I thought I might actually laugh. It was absurd. Insulting. But at the same time, so painfully predictable. My sister Emma had been my parents' golden child for as long as I could remember. If she wanted something, she got it. If I wanted something, I got whatever was left over. And now she wanted my wedding. I clenched my jaw, forcing the wave of bitterness down. And my parents? Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing a hand over his face. They're backing her up. They think it's only fair since she's older and hasn't gotten married yet. My grip on the vanity tightened. Only fair. Fair. That word had never once worked in my favor. I took a deep breath. "And what did you say?" Daniel met my eyes, and for the first time since he walked in, a slow, almost mischievous smile tugged at his lips. I told him I'd think about it. My brows furrowed. Think about it? And then he leaned forward, his voice low. "Linda, we're going to use this to our advantage." I blinked. Daniel was many things. Kind, loyal, protective. But one thing people always underestimated about him? He was calculating when he needed to be. "Do you really think I'd ever let this happen?" He continued, his tone turning sharper. "That I'd stand by while your sister turns our wedding into her personal fantasy?" I swallowed hard. "Then why not shut it down immediately?" "Because if we say no now, they'll just try to sabotage things another way." His fingers tapped against the bedpost. "But if they think they're getting what they want, we control the game." A shiver ran down my spine. I knew that look. I had seen it before, when Daniel had dealt with a corrupt landlord overcharging us for our first apartment. When a coworker had tried to throw him under the bus for missing reports. It was the look of someone setting a trap. A slow smile crept across my lips. "Tell me the plan." Daniel leaned in, his voice a whisper. "We let them believe they've won. We let Emma think she'll have her moment. Let my in-laws feel like they're helping by paying for things." He paused. "Then, when the day comes, we make sure she never gets the chance to walk down that aisle." A surge of something, vindication, excitement, power, bubbled in my chest. For the first time in my life, my sister was about to learn what it felt like to lose. I took a slow breath, letting Daniel's words sink in. We let them think they've won. It was a dangerous game. If we weren't careful, they'd walk all over us. If we played it right, my sister would finally experience what it felt like to be blindsided. I turned to Daniel, my voice steady. "All right, tell me exactly what we're going to do." His grin widened. "First, we give them just enough control to feel confident. Then, we tighten the leash until they're too deep to back out." I nodded. "And my parents?" Daniel leaned back against the bedpost. "They'll follow her lead. If she pushes for something, they'll push for it too. So we let her push, just not where it actually matters. I exhaled. This would take patience. Years of conditioning had taught me that arguing with my parents never worked. They twisted everything until I was the problem, until I was ungrateful, difficult, selfish. But if we played this right, we'd finally turn their own tactics against them. The next evening, I sat across from my parents and Emma in the living room of my childhood home. My mother sat primly on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap like she was attending a royal meeting. My father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. And Emma? She was practically vibrating with excitement, her fingers tapping against the armrest, her lips twitching with barely concealed smugness. So, my mother began, smoothing her blouse. Daniel told us he was open to discussing the arrangement. Have you had time to think about it? I forced a tight smile. Yes. Emma perked up. And I glanced at Daniel, playing my part. I hesitated, just enough to make it seem like I was struggling with the idea. I don't love it, I admitted, twisting my hands in my lap. But if it means keeping the peace in the family, I'm willing to make some compromises. Emma let out a soft gasp, like she'd just been granted a royal title. My father grunted in approval. That's very mature of you, Linda. My mother nodded. We knew you'd see reason. Reason. Right. Emma, unable to contain herself any longer, leaned forward. I already have a dress picked out, she gushed. I mean, obviously it won't be white, just a very pale champagne. But I found this stunning mermaid cut and it's so elegant. When I walk down the aisle first, people will just think I'm a part of the bridal party. It'll be symbolic, you know? A blessing almost, from the older sister to the younger. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. A blessing? From her to me? Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder to hold steady. That sounds interesting, I said, keeping my voice measured. But if we're going to do this, I have a few conditions. The energy in the room shifted. My parents tensed slightly, and Emma tilted her head. Conditions? She echoed, as if the concept was foreign to her. Daniel jumped in smoothly. Just little things. If we're making adjustments for Emma, then we'll need some help with the extra costs. That means budgeting for an upgraded venue, extra seating, catering. He gave a careful pause. We'll need some financial support. My mother waved a dismissive hand. Oh, that's not a problem. Of course we'll help. We want this to be special for both of you. Perfect, Daniel continued. Also, since Emma will be in the procession, we need to coordinate the dresses carefully. It has to look right in photos, which means we should get our dresses from the same boutique to ensure the colors complement each other. Emma's eyes widened with excitement. Yes, we can go dress shopping together. I swallowed my revulsion and forced a smile. That would be great. What I didn't say was that I already had my dream dress. It was waiting for me at a boutique 2 towns over, far away from Emma's meddling hands. My father grunted again. Anything else? Daniel nodded. We'll also need to book a top-tier photographer and videographer. If Emma is going to be part of the ceremony, we want to make sure it's documented properly. My mother smiled. Of course. And finally, I said, tilting my head just slightly, if Emma is walking down the aisle first, she won't be a bridesmaid, right? Emma blinked. Huh? I kept my tone light, innocent. Well, if she's getting a moment in the spotlight, then she can't also be part of the bridal party. It would just be too much focus on one person. I think it's only fair. Emma's face twitched. I could see the hesitation flicker across her features. She hadn't expected to lose anything in this exchange, but she had already won too much to argue now. She let out a delicate laugh, flipping her hair. I suppose that makes sense. A small sacrifice for such a special moment. And just like that, I had removed her from my wedding party. It wasn't a major victory yet, but it was the first step. Daniel's fingers brushed against mine again, his silent way of saying, "You did it." As the conversation wrapped up, my parents looked pleased. Emma looked triumphant, and Daniel and I looked like we had conceded. But in reality, we had set the stage. They had just paid for their own downfall. If there was one thing I had learned from growing up in my family, it was this: never let them see you coming. The moment we walked out of my parents' house, Daniel let out a low whistle. That was something. I exhaled, the weight of the night pressing down on me. I can't believe she actually thinks she's going to pull this off. Daniel grinned. Oh, she'll try. But by the time we're done, she won't even see it coming. The plan was in motion. Now we just had to make sure Emma, my parents, and everyone else kept believing it. A week later, Emma and I stood in front of a boutique mirror, each of us in our respective gowns. She was twirling, examining herself from every angle, completely absorbed in her reflection. The champagne-colored dress was far too bridal for someone who wasn't the bride, but I had expected nothing less. Meanwhile, I stood in a simple, elegant white gown. Not my real dress, of course. That was safely hidden away, untouched by Emma's interference. Oh, Linda, she sighed, spinning once more. I just know people are going to be so emotional when they see me walk first. It's going to be such a powerful moment. I forced a smile, biting down on my tongue so hard I could taste blood. Powerful? The only thing powerful about that moment would be her realization that she'd never actually walked down my aisle. The sales assistant approached, smiling warmly. Are we saying yes to the dresses? Emma nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. My parents are covering the cost, of course. I let out a small, innocent laugh. Oh, Emma, we should let them spoil us a little. After all, this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Emma beamed. My words had worked like a charm. Once in a lifetime. She thought this was her moment. She had no idea we were building her up just to let her fall. Daniel had already taken care of everything. The dress order would never be processed. A few days before the wedding, Emma would receive a call letting her know there had been a mix-up and her dress hadn't arrived on time. And since she refused to put anything in writing, per Daniel's careful suggestion, there would be nothing she could do about it. She'd be left scrambling at the last minute. I wondered how much of a powerful moment it would be then. The next part of the plan? The guest list. My mother had insisted on handling the invitations, under the pretense of making things easier for me. What she really wanted was control. Daniel and I knew better than to argue, so we agreed. But we also made a minor adjustment before the final list was printed. See, my parents had ensured that Emma's friends were invited, even people I barely knew. Meanwhile, some of my closest friends had mysteriously been left out. Daniel discreetly mentioned this to my mother, making it seem like he was on her side. Linda's been so stressed, he had told her. I don't think she even noticed the changes. She ate it up. She had no idea that Daniel had already printed a second set of invitations and sent them out behind her back. By the time she realized my friends were at the wedding, it would be too late to do anything about it. Meanwhile, Emma's group? Their invitations would mysteriously never arrive. We had one last deception to set up before the wedding. It was risky, but if it worked, it would guarantee that Emma would be exactly where we needed her on the big day. Daniel and I invited my parents and Emma over for dinner. I played the nervous bride, pretending I was having second thoughts about our arrangement. I just don't want any surprises, I murmured, keeping my voice small, vulnerable. I know Emma wants this to be special, but I can't handle any last-minute changes. Emma huffed, rolling her eyes. Linda, you worry too much. Just trust me. Oh, Emma, I already knew she had a plan to upstage me. The fake aisle walk wasn't enough for her. She was planning something else. We just needed to flush her out. So I took the bait. You promise you won't do anything unexpected? I asked. No surprises, no extra speeches, no... Linda, Emma smirked. I wouldn't dream of it. She was lying, of course. We just had to wait and see what she was planning. Because whatever it was, Daniel and I would be one step ahead. As they left, Daniel pulled me into his arms, whispering against my ear, You're doing great. I let out a slow breath, steadying myself. The stage was set. Emma had no idea the wedding she thought she was stealing would never happen for her. She was about to get exactly what she deserved. The morning of my wedding arrived with an eerie sense of calm. I should have been nervous, my stomach tied in knots. But as I sat in my bridal suite sipping my coffee, I felt nothing but anticipation. Today wasn't just my wedding day. It was the day Emma would finally learn what it felt like to lose. The first sign that everything was going wrong for Emma came at 9:17 a.m. I was getting my hair done when my phone vibrated on the table beside me. I glanced down and saw a text from my mother. Mom. Linda, we have a huge problem. Emma's dress is missing. The boutique says it was never ordered. I felt my lips twitch. Oh, Emma, this was exactly the moment we had been waiting for. I took a slow sip of my coffee before responding. Me. Oh no, that's awful. What happened? Her reply was instant. Mom, I don't know. Emma is panicking. She says she confirmed the order, but they're claiming she never did. Can you call them? I let the message sit there. I wasn't about to rush to help my sister fix a problem that had been carefully orchestrated. 10 minutes later, another message came in. Mom. Linda, please. This is a disaster. I finally replied. Me. I'm so sorry, but I can't get involved right now. I'm getting ready for my wedding. I'm sure Emma will figure something out. I could picture exactly what was happening at that moment. Emma, standing in front of a mirror, her hair half done, screaming at my parents. My mother frantically calling the boutique, demanding to know what had happened. My father, already in his suit, pacing back and forth, barking orders at anyone who would listen. Meanwhile, Daniel and we were exactly where we needed to be. At 10:30 a.m., Daniel received a text from his brother. Bro, you need to see this. Attached was a photo of Emma's friends standing outside the venue, confused and angry. Their invitations had never arrived. Daniel's response? Daniel. That's so weird. Maybe they got lost in the mail? By now, my parents must have realized something was wrong. The guest list had been tampered with. Emma's dress had mysteriously vanished, but they were too busy scrambling to fix everything to actually put the pieces together. And that's when the final blow landed. At exactly 12:15 p.m., my father called me. I ignored it. At 12:17 p.m., he called again. This time, I picked up. Dad? I answered sweetly. Linda, he said, his voice tense. We have a serious situation. Emma is at the venue, but they won't let her inside. I pretended to frown. What? What do you mean? The security, he snapped. They're saying she's not allowed in. I sighed, shifting in my chair. Oh, Dad, that's strange. I specifically told the venue that only invited guests should be allowed in. Maybe her name wasn't on the list? There was a pause. A moment where I knew my father was trying to piece it all together. You did this, he finally said, his voice dropping. I smiled. Did what? You set her up. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. You know I've been so busy with wedding planning. I didn't even handle the guest list. Mom did. Another pause. I could hear my mother's voice in the background, frantic, Emma screeching like a banshee. My father lowered his voice. Fix this. Now. I let out a small laugh. Dad, I'm the bride. I don't think I should be dealing with this right before I walk down the aisle, do you? He exhaled sharply. Linda, gotta go, I chirped, then ended the call. I turned to Daniel, who had been listening the whole time, his expression positively gleeful. She's outside? He asked. I nodded. Perfect. While I stood inside the bridal suite, safe and serene, Emma was losing her mind at the entrance. Security, who had been briefed well in advance, stood firm. I don't care what the list says, Emma shrieked. This is my sister's wedding. Let me in. One of the guards checked his clipboard. Ma'am, if your name isn't on the list, we can't allow you entry. Venue policy. Emma turned to my father. Dad, do something. But my father, for the first time in his life, was completely powerless. Because there was no proof, no emails, no written agreements, just his word against ours. You're making a mistake, he warned the guards. But they didn't care. They were being paid well to do their job. And their job was keeping Emma out. Inside, the music began to play. I stood at the entrance of the chapel, my bouquet in hand, radiating peace as my guests turned to look at me. There were whispers. People had heard. People knew, and yet, as I took my first step down the aisle, I felt something I had never felt before. Freedom. I wasn't walking in Emma's shadow anymore. This was my moment. I caught Daniel's gaze at the altar. His pride, his love, his silent, we did it. Outside, my sister was probably still screaming. Inside, I was finally free. As the wedding ceremony concluded and Daniel and I were officially pronounced husband and wife, a wave of triumph washed over me. For the first time in my life, Emma hadn't won. She hadn't taken something from me. She hadn't made me an afterthought. But the real battle was just beginning. Because outside, Emma wasn't done. By the time we made our way to the reception hall, the atmosphere was electric with whispers. People knew something had happened. Some guests had stepped outside and seen the chaos firsthand. Others had heard about it through the family grapevine. And those who didn't know? They could sense the tension. I spotted my mother and father standing near the entrance, their faces like thunderclouds. They hadn't even congratulated me. But honestly, that wasn't surprising. I wasn't their priority today. Emma was. I squeezed Daniel's hand. Ready for the next round? He grinned. Oh, I've been waiting for this. We barely made it to our table before my mother stormed over. Linda. Her voice was sharp, controlled, but her eyes raging. I turned to her with the most innocent expression I could muster. Mom, I'm so glad you could make it. Isn't it a beautiful day? She didn't bite. You humiliated your sister, she hissed. Daniel let out a small, amused laugh. How, exactly? She was standing outside crying in front of everyone. My mother snapped. You set her up. I feigned deep confusion. Mom, I really don't understand. We sent out invitations months ago. If Emma's name wasn't on the guest list, that wasn't something I handled. Maybe you should ask yourself what went wrong. She spluttered, eyes narrowing. I asked myself exactly that when the security told us she wasn't on the list. My father cut in. His voice was low, controlled, but beneath it was pure fury. And? I tilted my head. And I realized something. You've been playing us this whole time. The silence around us was deafening. The guests at nearby tables were listening. My mother leaned in, her voice shaking. You think you're so clever, don't you? Daniel smirked. We don't think, ma'am. We know. I watched as the realization fully hit my parents. They had been played. They had funded my wedding. They had fallen for every trap. And now, Emma was outside, humiliated. My mother's lips trembled with rage. My father's face was stone cold. And then, in the most perfectly timed moment of my life, Emma burst through the doors. Gasps rippled through the reception hall as Emma stormed in. Her face was smeared with mascara, her eyes swollen from crying. And she was still in her everyday clothes. She had no dress, no grand entrance, no moment of triumph, only anger. She marched toward me, her hands shaking. You, she hissed. I gave her a bright, polite smile. Oh, Emma, I wasn't sure you were coming. She let out a sharp, furious laugh. Are you serious? You left me outside. You destroyed my dress order. You kept my friends out. And now you're sitting here acting like I'm the crazy one? The entire room was silent. Everyone was watching. My mother reached for Emma's arm. Sweetheart, maybe we should... No. Emma yanked away. I want to hear her say it. I want to hear her admit it. I tilted my head. Admit what? Emma's eyes burned into mine. That you did this to me on purpose. I took a slow sip of my champagne. Then I set the glass down and leaned forward. Emma, I said softly, so only she and my parents could hear. You did this to yourself. Her breath hitched. I smiled. You tried to take my moment, and it backfired. Her hands curled into fists. You think you won? She whispered. I leaned back. I know I did. Daniel chuckled beside me. You'll get over it, Emma. That was the final breaking point. With a frustrated scream, Emma grabbed a glass from the nearest table and threw it. Right at me. The glass never hit me. Daniel, who had been expecting something like this, caught it midair. There was a collective gasp from the guests. Emma froze. My father grabbed her arm. Enough. My mother looked horrified. And then I heard it. The murmurs from the guests. She's lost it. I can't believe she did that. She's embarrassing herself. This is her own fault. Emma's face drained of color. For the first time in her life, she realized that no one was on her side. Not even our parents. Daniel set the glass down carefully. Then he turned to my father. I think it's best if you take Emma home, he said. My father, for once, didn't argue. He nodded stiffly, grabbed Emma's arm, and led her away. My mother hesitated, glancing at me. I didn't say a word. And finally, after a long moment, she turned and followed my father out. The doors swung closed behind them. I let out a deep breath, and then, in the most surreal moment of my life, the entire room burst into applause. People clapped, cheered, and as Daniel wrapped his arms around me, pressing a kiss to my forehead, I realized something. I was finally free. The air felt lighter after my parents and Emma left. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the next fight. I wasn't bracing for another betrayal. I was married. Happy. Free, and Emma? Emma had been exposed. The reception moved on quickly after the dramatic exit. People were eager to change the mood, and I couldn't blame them. The music started again, the drinks flowed, and laughter filled the room. I danced with Daniel, surrounded by people who actually cared about me. It was surreal. I had spent my entire life fighting for scraps of love and attention from my parents. I had wasted years trying to be enough. And in the end, I had been chasing something that was never real. I didn't need their validation. I had my own life now. A husband who stood by my side. Friends who had been there all along. A family that I was building for myself. Emma, my parents. They weren't a part of that anymore. And that thought? That was the most liberating feeling of all. The honeymoon flight was early the next morning. Daniel and I barely got 4 hours of sleep before heading to the airport. And as we waited to board, my phone buzzed. My mother. I sighed, staring at the screen. Daniel glanced over. Don't do it, he said. Don't let them drag you back in. I knew he was right, but something in me needed to hear what she had to say. So I picked up. Mom. A beat of silence. Then, you've really done it this time. I closed my eyes. Mom, if you're calling to lecture me, your sister is devastated, Linda, she snapped. You embarrassed her in front of everyone. How could you? How could I? I let out a soft laugh. Mom, are you really asking me that? I asked. After everything she did? My mother scoffed. She didn't deserve that level of humiliation. You should have just let her walk down the aisle. Would it really have hurt you? And there it was, the final confirmation. Even after everything, even after my wedding had almost been stolen from me, my mother still believed that I should have stepped aside for Emma, that I should have let her win, that I didn't deserve to have something for myself. And in that moment, I finally let go of any last hope that my parents would change. They wouldn't. They never would. I exhaled. You know what, Mom? I don't care anymore. A pause. Excuse me? I don't care what you think, I said, my voice steady. I don't care what you or Dad or Emma say about me. I'm done. Linda. I cut her off. Number, listen to me. I straightened my back, gripping my phone tightly. I spent my entire life being the afterthought in this family. I continued. I spent years letting you and Dad put Emma first. I let you make me feel like I was less than her. Like I had to fight for even the bare minimum of your love. My mother was silent. But not anymore, I said, my voice unwavering. This was the last time you tried to take something from me. And it didn't work. I won't be manipulated again. I won't fight for a place in your family. Because I don't need one. Linda, don't be ridiculous, she said, her voice sharp now. We're your parents. We're family. You don't just walk away from family. I smiled. Then maybe you shouldn't have treated me like a stranger my whole life. And then, before she could say another word, I hung up. Daniel was watching me carefully. You okay? I let out a breath. And for the first time in years, I actually meant my answer. Yeah, I'm good. Because I was. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. I was free. Daniel wrapped an arm around me, pressing a kiss to my temple. Proud of you. I smiled, leaning into him. As we boarded the plane, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was it. A new chapter. A new life. One where I wasn't fighting to fit into someone else's expectations. One where I chose my own happiness. And as the plane took off, leaving everything behind, I knew one thing for certain. I had finally won. What do you mean Emily will own the company? My voice was steady, but my hands clenched under the table. The elegant chandelier above the dining room cast a warm glow over the table, but the air in the room had turned ice cold. My father, Richard Caldwell, the man whose company I had saved from ruin, barely glanced up from his plate as he continued cutting into his steak. Lauren, let's be realistic, he sighed, like he was explaining something simple to a child. You're great at technical things, but leadership? That's not your strength. We need someone with presence, someone who commands respect. Your sister is the best choice. Emily, sitting across from me in her designer dress, sipped her wine with a small, knowing smile. She hadn't lifted a single finger to help when Caldwell Enterprises was drowning in debt. But now, with the company turning record-breaking profits, she was being handed everything. I developed the software that saved this company. My voice was sharper now, cutting through the clinking of silverware. Without it, you wouldn't even have a company to pass down. Dad chuckled, as if my words were amusing. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and tossed a crumpled bill onto the table. For your effort. I stared at the $50 bill lying between my plate and my untouched wine glass. $50. For the years I had spent working late nights, writing code until my eyes burned. For the countless sleepless weeks I'd spent analyzing financial losses, designing a system that would not only pull us out of bankruptcy but launch us to the top of the industry. $50 for the innovation that had turned Caldwell Enterprises from a dying relic into a $300 million powerhouse. Mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat, casting a glance at me, but she said nothing. No one did. I looked at my father, the man I had idolized growing up, the man I had worked my entire life to make proud. And in that moment, I realized something. It was never about merit. It was never about effort, or success, or even loyalty. It was about control. I see. My voice came out quieter than I expected. I picked up the $50 bill, turned it over in my fingers, and then calmly folded it into my napkin. Then I stood. Lauren, don't be dramatic, Dad scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. I smiled. I'm not being dramatic. I'm just excusing myself. Clearly, my role in this family is nothing more than a background character, so I'll remove myself from the scene. Emily let out a soft chuckle, barely hiding her amusement. "Lauren," Mom started, but I was already walking out of the dining room, my heels clicking against the marble floor. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell or demand fairness. I simply left. The next morning, I arrived at work early, as always. The office had changed over the past year. Just a year ago, the atmosphere had been suffocating. Employees whispering about layoffs, department heads quitting before the company could collapse. Now, it was thriving. My software had revolutionized the logistics industry, automating processes that used to take weeks into mere minutes. We had expanded globally, securing deals with top clients. But today, something felt different. As I walked through the lobby, I noticed a few nervous glances exchanged between employees. Conversations hushed when I passed. I reached my office, only to find the door already open. Inside, my desk had been emptied. My computer was gone. The nameplate that had once read, "Lauren Caldwell, CTO," was missing. Sitting in my chair, comfortably flipping through some documents, was Emily. She glanced up with a bright, artificial smile. "Oh, good morning, Lauren. Didn't Dad tell you? I'll be moving into this office. You'll be reporting to me now." I felt my stomach drop, but my expression didn't waver. "What's my position?" My voice was steady. Emily tilted her head as if considering. Then she shrugged. "We'll figure something out. Maybe something in IT support?" IT support. In my own company. In the company I had saved. She smirked. "Dad suggested you take some time off, actually. Relax. Maybe work on some hobby projects. But don't worry, you'll still be part of the company. In some capacity." I took a slow breath, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. They wanted me out. After everything I had done. After every sacrifice, every late night, every solution I had created to keep this company alive. They were discarding me like an afterthought. Like I was worth $50. I stared at my sister, then at the company logo on the glass walls outside my office. Caldwell Enterprises. A name that once meant family, loyalty, and legacy. Now it only meant betrayal. But I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I simply nodded. Understood. Then I turned and walked out. They thought they had won. They thought I would disappear quietly. They had no idea what was coming next. I walked out of the office with my head high, my pulse steady. They thought they had buried me. They thought I would disappear, accept whatever scraps they tossed my way, maybe even beg to stay. But as I stepped into the elevator and the doors slid shut, a single thought burned in my mind. Watch me. The first thing I did was vanish. Not literally. I still showed up to work the next morning, still sat at the tiny desk they had assigned me in the farthest corner of the building, surrounded by interns who didn't yet realize who I was. But I didn't fight back. I didn't argue. I watched. And in less than a week, I saw exactly what was happening. Emily was in way over her head. She had no idea how to run a company, let alone one that had just scaled into a multi-million-dollar empire. She spent her days in endless meetings, making decisions based on instinct instead of actual data. She dismissed department heads who tried to advise her, replacing them with her friends, people whose only qualification was knowing which wine paired best with which cheese. The company wasn't just vulnerable, it was on the brink of collapse again, and I had built everything they were now destroying. That's when I made my decision. If they didn't want me at Caldwell Enterprises, I would build something bigger. Late one evening, long after most employees had gone home, I sat in a coffee shop across from three of the smartest, most capable people I had ever worked with. Jake, our former CFO. The man who had balanced the books when the company was drowning in red, who knew every financial loophole like the back of his hand. Maya, the best data analyst in the business. She had practically built our customer profiling system from scratch. David, our lead engineer. The only person who knew my software as well as I did, because we had coded most of it together at 3 a.m., running on caffeine and pure desperation. All three had quietly resigned within the past month. They weren't idiots. They had seen the writing on the wall. Lauren, Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. What's the play here? I looked at them, then pulled out a folder. Inside was everything I had been working on in secret. We're building something new, I said simply. I didn't need to convince them. They were in. There was one thing Emily and my father had overlooked: the software. Yes, it was under Caldwell Enterprises' name. Yes, they technically owned the rights to it, but I had written the original code long before I ever implemented it into the company. And the newest version? The one with the most advanced features? I had never uploaded it to their servers. It was still mine. I spent the next month working in silence, refining it, improving it, making it stronger, faster. Then I pitched it. Not to Caldwell Enterprises, to their competitors. Within 3 weeks, I had 3 offers. By the end of the month, I had a deal, a $50 million contract. And just like that, I wasn't just competing with Caldwell Enterprises. I was about to destroy them. The first sign of trouble for my father's company came quietly. A client that had been loyal to Caldwell Enterprises for over a decade suddenly pulled their contract. Then another. And another. Emily panicked. She started demanding answers, firing people at random, blaming everyone but herself. But the truth was simple. The industry had moved on. The next generation of software, the one I had perfected, was now running their competitors' systems. Caldwell Enterprises was suddenly outdated, and I was just getting started. The moment came 6 months later. I sat at a luxury hotel ballroom, sipping champagne as the keynote speaker wrapped up their presentation. This was the Tech Innovators Gala, one of the biggest industry events of the year. Every major CEO, investor, and executive was here. And this year, I was the guest of honor. As my name was announced, I stood and walked onto the stage, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Tonight, we recognize the visionaries pushing the industry forward, the host said. Lauren Caldwell, the creator of the most groundbreaking logistics software in the market today, has transformed the way global corporations operate. Her company, Nova Systems, is now valued at over $500 million. The applause was deafening, but as I looked out into the crowd, my eyes locked onto a familiar face. My father, sitting in the back next to Emily. Their company was on the edge of bankruptcy again, and they both knew it. I smiled, not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because I had finally learned the lesson they had tried so hard to teach me. I didn't need their validation. I had won on my own terms. And this time, there was nothing they could do to stop me. It had been exactly 1 year since that humiliating dinner. 1 year since my father tossed a crumpled $50 bill onto the table and told me I wasn't good enough. 1 year since my sister smirked at me, knowing she was being handed something she had never worked for. 1 year since I walked away without a fight, only to win the war. Now, as I sat at the head of the Nova Systems conference table, reviewing our latest quarterly report, I could barely suppress a smile. Revenue, $320 million. Market share, 48% and climbing. Caldwell Enterprises? They were bleeding. I had systematically dismantled every advantage they once held. Their clients had jumped ship, their stock had plummeted, and their latest financial report, leaked to the press just a week ago, confirmed the worst. They were on the brink of collapse. And that was when the inevitable happened. At precisely 10 a.m., my assistant buzzed into my office. Lauren, your father and sister are here to see you. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. South it had finally come to this. Send them in. They walked in like ghosts. Emily's designer wardrobe couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. My father, always so composed, always so certain of himself, looked older, defeated. They had lost, and they knew it. Lauren, my father began, his voice carefully measured. We need to talk. I gestured to the chairs in front of my desk. They hesitated. Probably because they could tell that, for the first time in their lives, they were walking into my territory. But they sat. Emily shifted uncomfortably, her nails tapping against the armrest. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad sighed. Look, we've had our differences, but at the end of the day, we're family. Caldwell Enterprises is struggling. We need your help. Ah, there it was. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm. Finally, I spoke. And what exactly are you asking me to do? Dad leaned forward. We're willing to offer you a leadership role. Something meaningful. I realize now that we may have underestimated you. I tilted my head. You realize now? Emily finally looked up, her expression tight. Lauren, don't be petty. We need you, okay? I laughed. Actually laughed. You need me? I repeated. That's funny. Because a year ago you told me I wasn't leadership material. You told me I was only good for technical things. Dad had the nerve to look frustrated. You know how business works. Decisions were made, but now we have to move forward. If you come back, we can rebuild Caldwell Enterprises together. There it was again. Control. They didn't want me. They wanted to own me. And what position are you offering? I asked, feigning curiosity. Dad straightened his shoulders as if preparing to seal the deal. You'd be second in command, right beneath Emily. I blinked. And then I laughed again, louder this time. Emily flushed. Lauren, grow up. You built some software? Fine. But that doesn't mean you know how to run a company at our level. I stopped laughing. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the desk between us, and I made sure my voice was as cold as ice. Emily, I said softly. My company is worth $500 million. Yours is weeks away from bankruptcy. Explain to me again which one of us doesn't know how to run a company. Silence. Pure, satisfying silence. Dad cleared his throat. Lauren, please. It was that word that did it. Please. The same man who had dismissed me, belittled me, thrown money in my face like I was an unworthy employee instead of his daughter, was now begging. And I had never felt more at peace. No. Emily stiffened. Excuse me? I said no. I repeated. I don't need Caldwell Enterprises. You needed me and you threw me away. You made your choice. And now? You get to live with it. Dad exhaled sharply, frustration creeping into his voice. You're seriously going to let your own family fail? I didn't let anything happen, I replied smoothly. You destroyed this company the moment you put Emily in charge. Emily pushed back from her chair, standing abruptly. Her face was red now. You're just bitter, she snapped. You've always been jealous of me. I gave her a slow, amused smile. Jealous? Emily, I don't need to be jealous. I already have everything you wanted. I stood as well, smoothing down my blouse. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a real company to run. My father left in furious silence. Emily stormed out. But before she disappeared through the doors, she turned back. I hope you're happy, Lauren. I met her gaze, utterly calm. I am. She walked out without another word. And as the doors closed behind her, I sat back down, exhaled. Then I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I was finally free. The moment the doors closed behind my father and sister, I allowed myself a long, slow exhale. They thought they could walk in here, throw a few hollow apologies at me, and expect me to come running back to fix their mess. They had no idea who I had become. But as much as I enjoyed watching them squirm, I knew this wasn't over. Caldwell Enterprises was dying, and when a sinking ship goes down, it pulls everything and everyone down with it. The question was, would I let that happen? The news broke 3 days later. Caldwell Enterprises had officially declared bankruptcy. It was everywhere. Business magazines, online forums, even national headlines. Former industry giant Caldwell Enterprises collapses overnight. Poor leadership decisions sink a $300 million company. How greed and family politics killed Caldwell Enterprises. And the best part? Every article credited the company's former success to me. They all pointed out the obvious. The only reason Caldwell Enterprises had survived its first near collapse was because of the software I had built. And once I was gone, it was only a matter of time. I was in a meeting when my assistant, Claire, knocked on my office door. "Lauren, you might want to see this." She handed me a printed document. I scanned it quickly, my lips curving into a small smirk as I reached the last paragraph. Caldwell Enterprises was being liquidated. Everything was up for sale. The headquarters building, the remaining assets, even the Caldwell name itself. Dad was desperate. He had over-leveraged the company, taken out loans in a desperate bid to save it. And now? The banks were seizing everything, and I could buy it. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. That evening, as I sat in my penthouse apartment overlooking the city, I thought about what I wanted. I had spent so much time proving myself, so much energy fighting against the people who had dismissed me, betrayed me, belittled me. And now? I had already won. Did I really need to crush them further? I thought back to that night, 1 year ago, when my father had tossed $50 onto the table like it was a tip for a waitress. Like I was worth nothing. And just like that, my decision became crystal clear. I made my move the next morning. I didn't go through an investment firm. I didn't use a third party. I wanted them to know exactly who was taking everything from them. So I called the bankruptcy attorney handling Caldwell's liquidation myself. "I'd like to place a direct bid on all Caldwell Enterprises assets," I said, including the name. The attorney hesitated. "Ms. Caldwell, do you understand what that would mean?" I smiled. "I understand perfectly." A week later, I was sitting in the very same boardroom my father had once ruled over like a king. Only this time, I was the one holding the crown. The paperwork was spread out before me, a sleek black and gold pen resting on top of the final contract. With a single signature, Caldwell Enterprises would belong to me. The empire my father had built, the one he refused to let me lead, was now mine. Emily and Dad sat across from me, both of them ashen-faced. Dad looked like he had aged another 10 years in the past week. Emily wouldn't even make eye contact. "I still can't believe you're doing this," she muttered. I raised an eyebrow. "Doing what? Buying a failed company? Acquiring a name that no longer holds any value?" She scowled. "You know what I mean." I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers against the polished wood of the table. "Funny," I mused. "A year ago, you didn't think I was capable of running a company, but now you're acting like I have too much power." Dad exhaled sharply. "Lauren, just sign the damn papers." I picked up the pen, paused, and then I slid the documents back across the table. Dad blinked. Emily frowned. "What is this?" Dad asked. "A counteroffer," I said simply. He picked up the papers and scanned the first page. His eyes widened. "You're dissolving Caldwell Enterprises?" Emily gasped. "You're shutting it down?" I smiled. "That's right." My father looked like he might explode. "Why would you do that?" I leaned forward, my voice calm. "Because I don't need Caldwell Enterprises. I never did. But I do want one thing." I pointed to a single clause on the last page. Dad followed my finger, and his breath caught. Emily snatched the document and read it aloud, her voice shaking. "All remaining rights to the Caldwell name, patents, and intellectual property will be absorbed by Nova Systems and permanently retired." She looked up at me furious. "You're not just buying it, you're erasing it." I met her gaze, unwavering. Yes. Caldwell Enterprises would never exist again. The name would never be rebuilt. The company would never be resurrected. It would simply disappear, just like they had tried to make me disappear. Dad clenched his jaw. "You're just doing this to get back at us." "No," I corrected. "I'm doing this because some things deserve to die." I picked up the pen again. This time, I signed. And just like that, it was over. The Caldwell era was gone. And in its place, Nova Systems soared. With no competition from my father's failed empire, we expanded rapidly, securing exclusive contracts that once belonged to Caldwell Enterprises. Their legacy had been erased. Mine had only just begun. 3 months later, I received a letter. No return address. Just a simple handwritten note inside. Lauren, I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope one day you'll understand. Dad. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I tossed it into the fireplace. And as the flames consumed the last remnant of Caldwell Enterprises, I smiled. Because I had finally, completely, and utterly won. 3 months had passed since I erased Caldwell Enterprises from existence. 3 months since I signed that final document, ensuring the name would never rise again. 3 months since my father and sister walked out of that boardroom with nothing. And yet, for the first time since this all began, I felt peace. Nova Systems was thriving. With no competition from Caldwell Enterprises, we had expanded aggressively, securing every major client that had once been my father's pride. Revenue, $500 million. Market dominance, 62%. Status, undisputed leader in the industry. But numbers weren't what satisfied me the most. What satisfied me was walking through my office every morning and seeing a company built on merit. Seeing employees who were here because of skill, not nepotism. Seeing a company that I had built without needing my family's approval. But as much as I wanted to move forward, the past had a funny way of lingering, especially when I got the invitation. It arrived in an unmarked envelope, a simple cream-colored card with elegant gold lettering. The Caldwell Family Annual Gala. I had forgotten all about it. Every year, for as long as I could remember, my parents hosted the most exclusive event in the industry, back when they still had power. This year, my father wasn't hosting it. Someone else had taken over. Someone who bought their mansion at auction after the bankruptcy. The invitation was nothing more than a formality. No doubt whoever was running it now had no idea about the history between me and the Caldwells. It was an accident that I even received one. But instead of throwing it away, I made a decision. I was going, not to prove anything, not for revenge, but to end this story once and for all. The night of the gala, I arrived in a sleek, custom-tailored black gown, stepping out of my car with the quiet confidence of a woman who had nothing left to prove. The event was as extravagant as I remembered. Glittering chandeliers, elegant music, and a sea of wealthy elites sipping champagne like they still controlled the world. Except this time, I was the most powerful person in the room, and they all knew it. Whispers followed me as I made my way inside. Is that Lauren Caldwell? No, she runs Nova Systems now. Didn't she destroy her father's company? I ignored them. I wasn't here for them. I was here for one thing. And then I saw them. My father and sister. They weren't the center of attention anymore. They weren't surrounded by powerful executives discussing million-dollar deals. Instead, they were off to the side, a shadow of what they used to be. My father looked smaller than I remembered. His once commanding presence had faded, replaced by something I had never seen in him before. Regret. Emily, on the other hand? She still held herself high, but I could see the cracks in her mask, the way her fingers clenched around the stem of her champagne glass, the way her eyes darted toward me, then away. For the first time in our lives, I was the one with power, and they both knew it. I walked toward them, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Emily stiffened. My father turned, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, not resentment. Just defeat. Lauren, he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I tilted my head slightly. Dad. A long silence stretched between us. Then, he sighed. I suppose this is the part where you gloat. I smiled slightly. No, Dad. This is the part where I say goodbye. Emily blinked. What? I didn't come here to throw this in your faces, I continued. I didn't come to remind you of everything you lost. Because frankly, that's not my concern anymore. I set my drink down on a passing tray and met my father's eyes one last time. For years, I spent my life trying to earn your approval, trying to prove I was good enough. I exhaled slowly. But I don't need that anymore. I turned to Emily. And I don't hate you. I never did. I just pity you. Her face tightened. Because unlike you, I didn't need to steal power, I said. I built my own. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I gave them both one last look. Then I walked away. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because for the first time in my life, I was free. I left the gala without looking back, without the need to prove anything, because this was never about revenge. This was about becoming who I was meant to be. And as I stepped into my car, heading back to a company, a legacy, a future that was completely my own, I smiled. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning.